I'm Vanessa Ruck, the girl on a bike, and in this video I'm going to be telling you the #1 modification that you have to do to your motorcycle, particularly if you want to go fast. Now, I get a lot of messages from a lot of people saying, I've got this bike, what modifications should I do? How can I make it better to ride? How can I get faster? How can I improve my performance? And the #1 thing is exactly what this video is here to answer, and that is talking about suspension. It is often seen as this dark art, these springs and the gas and the oil and all the stuff that's going on. It's completely overwhelming and we don't really know where to start and what to do. So in this video, I'm going to talk you through key things that you can do at home to get the best out of your suspension on your motorcycle. And I can tell you from my own experience that getting your suspension right on your motorcycle will dramatically improve your riding performance and capability. So an example, I have done some of the pretty tough races around the world off-road now, including the Africa Eco Race, which is the original Dakar, earlier in January 2024. And my motorcycle for that event, I didn't quite have the suspension set up right on the first couple of days because I had it serviced and I put it back on, and with everything going into that race, I just kind of forgot to double check my suspension setup. And the first couple of days as we hit North Morocco were really, really rocky, and my suspension wasn't right for my riding, and I kept getting kicked about and thrashed, and I was getting so fatigued and riding so much slower than I normally was that it was just confusing me. So each evening with my mechanic in the bivouac, we tweaked my suspension, and thankfully by day 3 we hit that sweet spot again, and I would say I was probably 30 or 40% faster immediately just from having got that suspension set up correctly on the bike. And that was just setting up what was already on the bike, not buying new parts, etc. Another example was my very first enduro bike, and it links into the importance of suspension. So I'm going to tell you that example a little bit later. So why is suspension so critical on a motorcycle for our performance and riding capability? Now, if we think about a motorcycle, there is 2 wheels, which are the point of contact with the ground. That is the only contact the whole bike has as we're riding along. And the suspension's job is ultimately to keep those tyres in contact with the ground. But there are a lot of external forces in place that are there trying to get those wheels off the ground. And our suspension is there to have the bike body glide along while the wheels are going like this, taking out whatever is coming, especially when we're in an off-road environment. Now, when we hit a lump or a rock, the suspension is going to compress and come upwards, and then you need the suspension to rebound back to its original setting. But it's not all about the kicks up from the terrain. You could also get a hole in the terrain where your wheel is going to drop. So there is a full range in that suspension that is going to enable the bike to maintain that contact. And if we think about being on a motorcycle, when we're riding along, if our wheels leave contact with the ground, where even are we? We've got nothing. We've got no braking, we've got no cornering, we've got no acceleration. We are just floating. And that is why the suspension is so critical to giving you the performance out of the motorcycle, which then links to your confidence on the motorcycle. So we all know that motorcycles come with suspension. Why is it that we then need to do anything with our suspension when we buy our bike and get it home and want to start riding it? That is because a motorcycle is designed by the factories to be a one-size-fits-all. This bike comes as it is for Joe Bloggs to take home and ride. But I'm a 62 kilo rider. My husband is a 90 kilo rider. How many kilos are you? Are we all going to need the same suspension to keep those wheels on the ground? No, we're not. And that's where it's really important to understand what your bike has come with as far as its suspension setup. Now, if we take a typical example, my enduro bike, for example, comes with a spring in it that is set for a 85 kilo average rider. An 85 kilo spring, we're talking about this part of the suspension, isn't going to be the right strength for my body weight, and it's going to end up feeling like a rodeo bull. So if you're a lighter rider and you're riding along on your sort of off-road enduro bike and feel like it's constantly bucking you and kicking you, this is probably the reason why. And getting the suspension right is really critical to you getting the most performance out of the bike, having the best safety, and ultimately that performance as a result of all of that being set up correctly. So let's go into a bit more detail and talk about what are the things that you can do at home to work out if your suspension is set up right for you, and if not, what steps you can do to get it to that ultimate performance for you. And bearing in mind that all motorcycles have suspension, so this is relevant for a range of motorcycles. I just happen to have a motocross Honda here next to me. The first thing to think about is your spring. So I already showed you an example. I am here with Ohlins in Sweden at their HQ. So I have an Ohlins spring here, the beautiful gold that we will recognize. This spring is a key part of your suspension, and this is the bit that's really relevant to your body weight. Get the manual paperwork out for your bike and find out what body weight the OEM spring that is in your motorcycle is aimed at. And if you are not that body weight, get yourself onto the internet and find yourself the correct spring for your bike, for your body weight. And brands like Ohlins do these, and you can buy them and replace them onto your suspension. That's really important, because if your spring is for someone that's lighter than you, you're going to be putting so much weight on that spring, it's going to be taking way too much pressure, and you're not going to be able to get the full shock absorbing and comfort performance out of it. And on the other end of the spectrum, I already mentioned, if it's really rock hard and too stiff a spring for you, it's going to be like riding a rodeo bull. Every time that wheel hits something, it's going to be bucking you, and that's really exhausting as a rider. When I did the spring on my first enduro bike, I reckon I was 30% faster immediately, just from how the bike was absorbing the terrain. And it's remarkable what that does. So, number one, check your spring and make sure it is the right spring for your body weight. And bearing in mind, your body weight is with clothes. No naked riding here, okay? You always dress for the slide of the ride. So how heavy are you with all of your kit, your boots, your air vests, etc., that you are riding with? That's number one. Number two is setting your sag, which is the preload. Now, we're not going to get too techie on you, because I don't want you switching off and going, oh my goodness, she's talking really detailed stuff. This is not really detailed stuff. This is stuff that you can get your head around completely. So the preload is effectively what is happening to the suspension when you take the weight of the motorcycle going onto that spring and that suspension setting. The weight of the motorcycle is only part of it. You then have the additional weight. My bump doesn't fit through. You might notice that I've got a little one growing, so the weight of the bike isn't the only part that's on the spring. You've obviously got the weight of you, the rider, as well on the spring. So setting the sag is enabling you to have the full range of the suspension utilized, but in the correct part of the suspension. Because you've got to bear in mind, suspension isn't just taking shocks from the ground, it's also going down into the dips of the ground, absorbing impacts when you're jumping. And so setting your sag is finding the neutral point for your suspension before you start to put the impacts of riding along. And there is a process to set your sag, and when you take the weight of the bike and the weight of you, if you have the correct spring, so this bike doesn't have the correct spring with me, you can see the bike at the moment. When I then put my body weight onto it, even with the baby weight as well, the bike doesn't really compress too much, which is an immediate sign that this spring is too heavy for my body weight. But do make sure you check the paperwork and the actual settings on that. And setting your sag will make you be able to find best position for that preload, the neutral of the bike. And the neutral of the bike is where your suspension is going to constantly be getting back to. So when you do hit something and your suspension compresses, it's going to rebound back to that neutral. So setting your sag is critical. The good news is that I do also have a video in this series coming out, which is going to show you how to set your sag. So check out that video if you want to know how to set your sag. Third part of your suspension is maybe a little bit of a curveball because it doesn't even involve your suspension, and that is the rubber here on your tyres. This is just really badly set up for my bump today. So the tyres on your motorcycle are actually part of the suspension capability that you're getting from your motorcycle. So make sure you've got good tyres, the correct tyres for the sort of terrain that you're riding, the correct pressure, the right mousse in it, the tubeless, whatever it is you're running, just make sure you've got the best tyres suitable for the job because it all factors in. These are the two contact points with the ground, and your overall suspension's job is to get the contact of those 2 points with the ground to be maintained as much as possible. So make sure you've got the right rubber. Number 4 is your damping settings, and this is where I want to make sure you do not switch off. Because actually, looking at our damping settings, which is our compression and our rebound, which I will explain, is something that we can do at home. And with a lot of suspensions, we have the capability to tweak those at home as well. And tweaking those isn't something that you need to switch off and go, whoa, this is above me. So you've got compression. You've got your wheels. Compression is how quickly your suspension compresses under the force. So that's the up in your suspension. The rebound is how quickly it then returns to its neutral normal zone after that compression. Now there's lots going on inside the compression with the oil, the valve, the shims, the nitrogen gas, everything going on in there. But what you want to think about is what it feels like for you as a rider. Now you might have heard the term clicks, and clicks is generally the way that we think about adjusting these rebound and compression settings. And on a lot of the suspension, you've got adjustments on the top. We'll show you here on a couple of the Ohlins ones we've got on the table here. This is an example where you've got the compression and the rebound settings right on the side super easily, and the clicks relate to the twisting of these. It's generally recommended that you take it all the way back to 0 and then count your way back, and remember to count those clicks. Every time you're adjusting those clicks, you're going to be adjusting the flow rate of the oil, which is happening on the inside of the suspension. I do have another video where I talk about what's actually in the suspension and the importance of servicing and looking after it, so it could be worth watching that as well, because I'm not going to go into the insides of the suspension here. But those settings are worth having a play with. And you want to get it to a point where your bike feels predictable and feels comfortable to you. If you are setting things too soft or too hard, you're going to get more wallowing or you're going to get more kick. And it's worth just having a play about it. I think we can all feel a little bit too overwhelmed by these settings and not empowered to play with them. So recently I was on a trip in Norway on a big Harley Davidson with Annika on the back as a pillion. We had all of our luggage and we had a beautiful Ohlins suspension on it. I don't think I have one quite the same here, but it was a similar sort of suspension where you have the hose and reservoir and a really big, nice adjuster on the back to change these damper settings. And we just kind of on day one thought, right, we're bottoming out. Let's start to play with the clicks and see how it feels. And we stop, play with the clicks, carry on riding, feel a pothole. Oh, we're still bottoming out. Oh, maybe that felt a little bit, maybe do more clicks. Clicked it, oh no, we've clicked a little bit too far, click back again. It's all about feeling it, making some changes, going out having a ride, thinking about what the bike is doing, how predictable it is, how it feels when you brake, what it's doing when you hit the corner, what happens when you hit a pothole, and then making some more adjustments. And it's going to be a learning process, and it's okay. You're not going to just get it perfect straight away, but I want you to feel empowered to play with it, because everything you do click-wise is going to be reversible. I would recommend you get yourself a piece of paper and a pen and you write down what it is you've done, because it's so easy to go like, right, I've done this many clicks, I'm going to go for a ride, and then you come back and go, I can't remember how many clicks it was. And so you kind of almost go back to square one, because it's always recommended to go back to the beginning and then count your number of clicks. When you are looking at your clicks, it's worth bearing in mind where you are in the window of the range of the number of clicks that you can do. Because if you are right in the middle of the suspension, then you've got lots of scope on both sides for the compression and the decompression. But if you are really pushing it to one end, then you're going to be almost not able to utilize the full breadth of the suspension that you've got. So that is your clicks. Now, if you've done that and you've had a play and you've done lots of feedback and you still feel like you can't quite get the suspension to feel like you want it to feel, the next option is to look into getting your suspension revalved. And this is where it would be worth looking up a specialist in suspension. So Ohlins have a massive global network of suspension specialists where you can buy suspension and also have full servicing and support with your suspension. And it's definitely worth looking to their experience and knowledge when you're starting to go internally on suspension. A really, really easy way to emphasize that is that internally to this rear shock, there is hydraulic oil and there is also nitrogen gas. There's loads of specialist tools. There's loads of tiny little shims that are in there, which are for the flow of the oil that changes all the dampers. You've got the valves, you've got the pressure. There's lots of things going on, and even just the specialty tools you need to take these things apart. Don't find yourself a shim cowboy. That's what they're called when they think they know everything, and they could probably just potentially do quite a lot of damage to your expensive suspension. So I do recommend using reputable dealers, and the Ohlins website is a really good place to start with that. And that's where you'll be able to go into them and say, right, this is my bike. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is what my weight is. This is what I'm currently feeling. This is what I do like, this is what I don't like, and this is what I'm trying to work towards. And you can have a conversation and work out what's going to be the best setup. And they then have a huge knowledge and database of all of the different configurations and tweaks and shims and valves and everything to get that suspension set up for you properly and really lean on that professional experience and knowledge that they have as an organization. So next, you're going to go out and ride and enjoy it. And when you have got your suspension set up perfectly and it's an amazing, doesn't mean it's the end, because you can continue to tweak. You could change your style of riding or want to go off and ride in a different sort of terrain. The sort of suspension setup that you're going to want riding in really deep sand versus really aggressive hard rock is going to be slightly different. And your suspension isn't something that you need to set in stone. It can adapt and change with you in your riding. And the more you get used to your suspension and the more you learn how tweaks feel as you ride, the more empowered you're going to be going out there and making adjustments. It's also worth bearing in mind that there are different sort of types of suspension out on the market. We've got a few of them here, and once you start to go through to some of the higher spec products, you really do get a lot more control on the fly of that suspension. So a suspension system like this, where you can change the settings so easily externally without having to go inside and start looking at the valves quite so much, makes it a lot more easy to adapt things. So for example, let's just say you have a motorcycle that you like to take to track days, but you also commute on. You can adjust those settings much more easily to adapt to what sort of riding it is you're doing. Now, if you get your suspension right, the output that you're going to get from it is going to be so much better. The performance from the motorcycle, the predictability of the handling, the control, the feeling that you're going to get when you're hard braking into a corner and accelerating, you're going to just get so much more confidence out of it. And I think a key line that I absolutely love about suspension is that suspension is speed. Without the correct suspension, you're going to be kicked around, you're going to be feeling everything, and you're not going to be working harmoniously with your bike to get through the terrain. If you get your suspension right, you can get that confidence, and it's incredible how much more speed that you can get as a result of that. When you get that confidence, it's then where you really start to build on your riding. By being confident in what the bike is going to do underneath you, you can brake later, you can accelerate harder, you can really start to push the conditions. And suspension is by far the #1 modification that I would recommend you do to your motorcycle. Lots of people want to rip off the exhaust and put really loud things and fancy shiny bits. Get your suspension sorted, and that will be the best output for your time, your money, and your performance out there riding. Hopefully this has been an interesting video. Let me know if you've got any questions. I would love to see them in the comments. If you ask me something really, really technical, I will do my best to answer it. And if I can't, I will try and find some resources to help me in answering your technical questions. But I hope that this video in partnership with Ohlins and talking about suspension will help you feel a little bit more empowered about your suspension and how you can get the most out of it. I'm Vanessa Ruck, the Girl on a Bike. Please make sure you hit subscribe, tick the bell, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.